Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, or a very good day to you, when and wherever you're listening from, and a very warm welcome to the show. I'm Jared Murphy, and this is the Slick Podcast.
Oh, God, that's brilliant. I love that. Do you know what? I think we should actually can keep this on there because this has been actually...
Hit record again. All right, okay. Wait, we're already recording, right? We're doing this
I
again?
am recording. Right, okay.
Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, or very good day to you, when and wherever you're listening from, and a very warm welcome to the show. I'm Jared Murphy, and this is the Slick Podcast.
You have tuned in for a Slick Podcast. I'm here to seek the truth. Live from Scotland around the UK. The one and only Slick Podcast. Enjoy the show. Can I ask important questions? No matter how bizarre the truth might be. Tune in for Slick Podcast. Keeping it real, keeping it groovy.
Let's get the ball rolling in this one.
All right. Before we get started, shout outs to Graham McClellan. I mean, who doesn't know him?
True. I mean, he is excellent. Graham runs every day, and everyone. Yeah, I suppose I can't believe everyone knows Graham in America. That's quite cool.
Sleeping's for ordinary people, and this is a man that can run and work and run and work and work and run.
That's Graham McClellan. So big shout out to you, Graham. Okay, you last came on my show 7 months ago. So let's talk firstly of your journey to the Grand Canyon last year and the reasons for going and what you found.
Yeah, there is a long-running story about the G.E. Kincaid Cave, and that there was a man working for a subcontractor, essentially working for the Smithsonian, because it's usually touted as the Smithsonian, went to the Grand Canyon and found a cave that they cleared out either Egyptian or Asian artifacts, and the cave was at a very particular point, and people have talked about it for years. And I've a background the last 6 years. I've enjoyed being a climber, and I am fortunately around a very group of talented people that have all the right equipment. And the thought was, well, why is it that everyone keeps talking to, this subject of this mysterious cave that was not small in size? We're not talking a little hole in the ground. We're talking a large entrance to a cavern on the side of the Grand Canyon at a very particular point in the Colorado River in the Grand Canyon. And no one had been back. And I thought, okay, well, let's bring this crew and let's do a preliminary investigation out there. So I had been on the subject of planning an expedition when I talked to Rex from Leak Project, and he and I turned out both wanted to go. And he had a very good friend who is Navajo, because the location of the cave is on Navajo land. And we were able to get ourselves out there to look for it.
Did you find the cave?
We found we knew exactly where it was going to be based on, there are only a couple descriptions as to where it would be. And it's a very particular point near some rapids in the Colorado River. And we located it, again, exactly where it was supposed to be, and explored about, I would say, 6.5 to 10 miles, somewhere in 7.5 to 10 miles of the river. And the exact point that it was at, we have very detailed photography and imaging, and it is not there. Now, for everyone listening who isn't familiar, the description of the story came in 2 articles in the early 1900s of this G. Kincaid. His description was that he was in a boat on the river, and the cave is supposed to be 3,000 to, just so everyone knows, the portions of the Grand Canyon, quite a bit of it, the reason it's the Grand Canyon is because it's can be over a mile deep, and it can be at this particular point, the river winds, and there is a expeditionary point where people who are in the river who wait months or even over a year for their permits, they go on, it's kind of a bucket list item. Once you're on the river at this point, you've been on the river for 7 to 10 days, but directly below where the Kincaid Cave is supposed to be, there's an area that is a campsite, and people will stay there currently. But back in the day, we have G.E. Kincaid, who also in a canoe or boat would have been on the river for at least the 7 to 10 days. At this point, had looked up 3,200 feet. And that isn't even the top. He allegedly sees an entrance from the river, which would be very difficult to do because from where you're standing, where we were on the edge, the canyon is 18 to 25 miles wide. And in this particular case, we're at about, I think it was close to 3,460 feet deep. And the entrance to the cave is 1,400 feet from the top. So to actually see a cave entrance would be quite a thing and a decent achievement, given what you'd be managing in a boat. But let's just say he did. And I'm not saying this to be overly skeptical, but I just, the story is from a climbing standpoint, or for anyone out there who's a hiker or a runner, when you're doing off-trail hiking, there's some things that can make hiking, running on off-road trails challenging and also dangerous. And in this case, we're talking about somebody, 1907 to 1912 technology that scrambles allegedly is an achievable feat with equipment in that era for a single human being to get up over 2,000 feet to get to this, what isn't, again, a small entrance. It's a large cathedral. Like you're going to your average cathedral up the street, pick a spot in Scotland or England, your average double-doored, Gothic cathedral entrance size cave entrance. And it was said in the article that he had walked into what was multiple, maybe 70 or 80 coffins of a Buddha statue, and it was quite spectacular what he described and what he found. And it wouldn't have been unsimilar to all the exotic articles that were coming through National Geographic and a number of other reporting institutions about finds in Egypt. And, mind you, Machu Picchu hasn't even been found yet, but it has that very exotic description as to what he was finding in this cave. So this wasn't a small entrance. So when we get to the point in the river that he describes, that he was, said he was about a mile or two through these rapids, that is a very specific mile marker in the Grand Canyon. So for us to get there and for us to explore the wall of that canyon and to make a preliminary assessment, hey, okay, well, we're going to send some climbers over the side. And Scott Walter from America Unearthed did a whole show about, well, really it starts, there's always a lot of great information in any of Scott's shows. So one of the opening is the couple that had located what they thought was the location also, and they have video of climbers they sent over the side to try to get down to where the cave was supposed to be.
Could you, sorry to interrupt, Jared, while it's in my brain, is there any chance that you could have the link for that episode that you're now describing and what they're finding to me, and then I can put it on the show notes?
I do believe they've also posted that section on YouTube, so I'll get you the link, and people can watch these climbers for whatever reason. I have a few questions from a climbing standpoint as to how they got stuck, basically, these climbers. So in the interview, now, and I think it's still worth visually seeing. And for, even if you're not familiar with climbing, or if you are, I think there's some interesting points that, they get over the side, but they get stuck. And so they come back up. But the point is they don't actually get to where they think the cave entrance is. So we walked into it knowing all the other attempts. Ancient Aliens had been there. I believe David Hatcher Childress had stood pretty much where we were, and everyone kind of gets to the same point. They get there and they say, okay, well, the cave is directly below us, and it's a mystery and we can't really get to it. or it's still that we think it might be there. And it's like, okay, well, let's get some video, let's get some pictures, let's at least identify based on the height and the location what's there. And from the very high resolution photography that we took, and from what we looked at, there is either possibly, so here's what we know. It's collapsed. Either you can make the argument that, well, they took everything out of there and then they collapsed the cave. Okay. Well, also there was a description that there was in quotes, a staircase leading up to the cave, that it was you could tell that it was kind of a staircase, and that could easily be, chalked up to erosion, but there really wasn't any indicators of any type of a staircase or the eroded remains of a staircase. And then of the actual cave entrance, there was none. Now, thermal imaging at night, would help us determine. That's the one thing that we can't see. We'd have to be there overnight, and this is not an easy location to get to. Just so you know, it is over an hour and 20 minutes. You need an all-terrain vehicle. You need to, you're traveling through Navajo Nation, and you're in, at least in vehicle time, you're probably an hour and a half from, in quotes, a road that would be near a commercial petrol station or gas station. You are not near anything. If you are out here and not prepared, you have probably at least a whole day walk to get to a public location. There are ranches, so you are not entirely alone, but these are very spread apart, sometimes over a mile or two. And this is not a location you want to get stuck in. So when we went out there, we were prepared, and we had the right vehicles and winches and et cetera, et cetera. But we get out, and this is going to be a preliminary investigation, because you can't bring a full climbing team and expect to go over the side of a mountain, or, well, in this case, the side of the Grand Canyon, which is, at this point, 3,500 feet deep. We're not going to do that without locating the cave. And the issue is, the cave entrance was so large, to collapse an entrance like that is significant. And let's just say it happened, in which case our only resort is to use thermal imaging to determine whether or not there is a heat differential in the side of the, basically, even if the entrance was collapsed, the interior would be cooler, the exterior would be hot. At night, we'd be able to see that there was an entrance and that it was likely collapsed. Now, you could also argue that if there was enough boulders and they collapsed it deep enough or thick enough, we're not going to see it. So for those that want to believe that the cave is real and that it's still there, and to fulfill that, optimistic thought, then maybe it's just under tons and tons of stones. But the reality is that there's a number of opinions about it being a made-up story, that he was doing it for publicity, or that the G.E. Kincaid was actually not working for the Smithsonian, but he was actually doing nature photography, and it was a way to maybe get some fame or notoriety, or etc. But then this example, though, is a good one of other reveals that really blew our mind. It blew my mind to find out that there were 600 open uranium mining permits within the Grand Canyon. And starting in the 1950s, not only does the Grand Canyon have up and down it open uranium mining permits because it's rich with that, but to give everyone an idea, there is a tunnel system only of the over 240 miles. Remember, it's 26 to 18 miles wide. Only the professor that's in charge of Carlsbad, which is said to have pretty much most of the caves, more caves than anywhere else in the United States. He had been since the 60s in charge of caving and splunking and explorations for anthropology, paleoanthropology in the Grand Canyon. And he said, we're only about 130 miles in. And to give you one example of one cave that they found, and some of these caves are 500 feet off the ground. They're 1,000 feet off the ground. They're 3,000 feet or 4,000 feet. They're closer to the top than the bottom, which makes them ancient. And they find bones and mummified remains because the caves are basically filled with paleoanthropological evidence.
Your conclusions thus far, you and your team looked at what the evidence you've been able to gather. So where from now? Are you going to carry on looking, or are you going to put this on the back burner?
We have been generously offered a very, very, very expensive, complex piece of equipment that would do the thermal imaging for us. It's a $10,000 or $12,000 piece of equipment, and it would allow us to look exactly for a cave entrance that would be identified by, thermal imaging. But that's not a trip that's worth taking currently. So it's on the back burner in the sense that the logistics of, if we at least prove that there's a collapsed cave entrance, if the thermal imaging can pick it up, then we could say, hey, there is a possibility that a conspiracy or something exists in that, or there was a natural cave collapse. Either way, we could at least say at this mile marker, yes, there is a cave that has an entrance that is in the general area. Where we can leave it now is there is no cave at the general location that we can see, period, for the Kincaid story to say it's true or not. We have to be open to the possibility that it is still possible based on a cave collapse.
I've searched online for how long the Sahara Desert has been a desert, and it almost corresponds with the Younger Dryas event. That is to say, around 11,500 years ago. Before that, it is alleged to have been a green and lush paradise and to have had the biggest freshwater lake of anywhere on the planet. This completely changes the mind's eye picture I had of the pre-dynastic Egyptians. The nearest comparison would be of the massive buildings being found in the jungles of South America, which you pointed out have been found through LiDAR. What are your thoughts on that possible trove buried under the sands? Is there any effort that you know of to explore the deserts in search of our past selves?
Yeah, so there is a couple different things. Well, there were two lakes, and there were stories of the Nile going east, west, west, east, not going into the Mediterranean at all. And there was imaging done showing the dried up lake and riverbeds. And there were two significant lakes. I do have them on, and I hate to bring this up with everyone because we're so close to re-releasing an updated version of It's Not Aliens, Worse It's Us. There will be a new cover. It'll be in full color. And I have a map. It's in It's Not Aliens that shows those lakes and shows the river running east-west, not for just an artistic interpretation, but for legitimate indications of fresh water. And it was even analyzed, I guess, from a biological, botanical standpoint. There was greenage, they think, as early as 5,000 or 6,000 years ago, and that it may have been a lot more lush than we're giving it credit for post Younger Dryas, that it actually was a lush green environment. I think even in that world, it's hard to make changes, the paradigm shift, that it wasn't pre-Younger Dryas, that it actually was green a lot longer than we think. And then when Robert Schoch did the analysis on the Sphinx and the water erosion, there were some early shows in the 90s that had come out, and they were happy to discuss the idea of 35 or 36,000 years ago, at the end of the last ice age, that there was the theory was torrential rains and lush green environment, that there was nothing less than a tropical forest, just like what you would see out of the out-of-control jungles of Brazil and South America. But the current, imaging is that, okay, well, it's been nothing but sand. And there are, from the Nubian plains and the pyramids there to Egypt, not just buried cities that topically would have been, okay, yeah, there's a town. I love to reference Muhammad Ibrahim's observations that when we say 96% or 92% of Egypt's buried, they mean tunnels. They don't just mean burrowed through the earth looking for gold. They mean very complex underground rooms, chambers, and hallways, more like hallways than we would describe, like not a natural or just a rock cut, but very complex megalithic in structure. So very advanced. That would be the impression. But the reality is that these are very ancient. Yes, there's all the ages, the last thousands of years of dynastic peoples doing things underground or adapting spaces or remodeling them or adding on in a more simplistic fashion. But the reality is that what we're talking about, the majority of the finds underground, are actual underground systems for living during what could only be imagined as very rough or impossible surface climates, like during the Younger Dryas. Was it really cold? Was it really hot? Was it some sort of solar flare, like what the theories go for? How did Tanis get scorched and destroyed? How did which was the capital of Egypt? And we're talking the largest stone statues that they had ever made were in Tanis, along with the most complex Corinthian type pillars, and all of it shows signs of being scorched. So were they underground because there was a period of time that was it a natural disaster? Was it some sort of advanced weaponry? And did they really scorch the planet? Is that why these same similar, very, complex, advanced tooling tunnels exist from South America to under Egypt, but all across that northern plain, Libya, Algeria, all of it, and it remains, unfortunately, not as explored. Obviously Libya and that area, that we think of as more of the northwest portions of Africa, there's been a lot of strife, a lot of turmoil. Stonehenge is popular, but there's a Stonehenge in Libya that's much larger, much more complex. Again, possibly dating back well before Younger Dryas, much older than we think. And those are sadly left to ruin. And there are things, like you said, high priority, like where do you go? How do you spend your time? Do you look to find the drone to really chase down the G.E. Kincaid cave? Or do we, what's the low hanging fruit that not only, I don't think it's important anymore. It's important for us to discover our real past. It's not as important to prove that it's not a belief to know that there was a more advanced time in human history. The issues are to look at the technologies we can reach, identify the material sciences, identify, is there nanotechnology? Is it some sort of material sciences that we don't understand, in reference to advanced ancient geopolymers? There are ruins in our very, eye line. I mean, we're staring at it, like the Great Pyramid and so many other megalithic ruins, that we need to be able to get into the spheres that we're finding all over the earth and the archaeoacoustics, not for the sake of a religious ceremony. I know you say archaeoacoustics and you think ceremonies, and it's always in reference to Neolithic people, or they understood sound was scary and they made a sound through this blowhole and did it on the solstice. No. We're talking about ancient, highly tuned, high energy frequency societies abandoning or being destroyed away from places like Tanis and across the earth at Machu Picchu, and ruins that are way more advanced than we think and existed pre-Younger Dryas, but also past Younger Dryas, and like the Eye of Africa and what would be likely considered the Atlantean, again, it's so high off the ground that I do think that the idea is the more recent memories of dynastic people that we think of, like the Egyptians, Mayans, and all that, going, oh yeah, there was an advanced society. Well, again, are those the remnants of a very advanced human culture that may have shown their last cohabitations with us at places like what we think of the 10 cities of Atlantis? It's so often that we discuss the one city. That's not it. It's an advanced ancient culture that was within the sightlines of dynastic peoples, other survivors from a more disastrous take. And was it Younger Dryas, or was it the eruption of Mount Toba 75,000 years ago? Those are the questions. Those are some of the things that I think really matter to us understanding why do we have superhuman abilities.
Talk to me about those highly advanced underground habitats that are found around the world, some of them thousands of years old, when the ancient population was seemingly hiding from something that filled their lives with fear.
We've had shows explore some of the, like the Harappan, some of the cities in India that look like, again, you have the Hindu Vedas describing what looks like nuclear war. And then we have the same shadowed human beings on some of these ancient cities where the same destruction when Nagasaki and Hiroshima were bombed. We have the same shadowing of human lives against buildings and walls that appeared, evaporated, and the only thing left was a charred shadow. And we see that in the ruins of some ancient Indian cities and their descriptions of what seems like nuclear war. So we could go down that whole, not fantasy, but a very uncomfortable possibility that, again, we're describing humans with advanced ancient, again, they were just way more advanced and had this technology, and would deathly be afraid if you've reached a point where you're going at each other. And I've thought a lot about, there doesn't seem to be cohesion. It appears to me still to be like a cruise ship with people, where you have varieties of scientists to people who mechanics to just retail workers to artists and musicians. You have a hodgepodge of human beings surviving what could have been a very large disaster. And again, we think of history as lineal. And then on the other hand, we think, we get bombed into the Stone Age or disastered into the Stone Age, and then we start with rocks banging, and then we build ourselves back up. But there's always always random, and it's always a mysterious flaw, or something causes us to fall that is external, or this can't just right out of our mind's eye internal fatal flaw of humanity. And those are some massive leaps to make before we look at the technology in the ground. And that starts with explaining why you have a mud brick pyramid, and then you have a giant, 100, 600 ton block in the middle of it that is finely hewn and or melted or built completely by a technology and a people that we have no history of. So are those people, we're going to say it, we're going to frame it this way, are those the only people that were advanced in what we know of the evidences on Earth? Are they the only people on Earth that, we reached a level of technology, and then forevermore, that group of people have always been around? And did they get there 1 million years ago? Did they get there 500,000 years ago? Did they get there 100,000 years ago? that is one of the questions that has to be tabled and we have to want to answer.
The people out of the bunkers were the ones that maybe were capable of doing that 600-ton block. The people before their arrival and after their departure were the survivors that weren't lucky enough to be in a shelter.
Right. And therein lies the part of the fear question, or part of like, what are they doing in these bunkers, and are they all one peoples, and do they all get underground, and how many times do they do it? And really, we have two in our geological history. We have two big disasters to think about. I think the Younger Dryas, I think that whole period, 12,500 years ago, when something sparked the melt and sparked the flooding and sparked the rebirth or rejuvenation of the majority of the habitable lands that we are in now, may have been a disaster secondary to Mount Toba 75,000 years ago. So are we talking about a group of people that were really hit the disaster zone 75 plus or minus 1,000 years ago? Did Mount Toba go off, creating basically super nuclear winter for the entire earth? And did everything really go badly for everyone then? And then everything up to the Younger Dryas was chaos and the remnants of, and the reason I say that too, and we've talked about it before, but just for a reminder for those, for this being a new interview, it's, you have Denisovan and Neanderthal species of man and humans all breeding, and we have the genetic evidence for this, that around, and again, this is standard academia saying, well, at least 50 to 60,000 years ago, and that's in geological terms. I mean, we're within 15,000 years of, within context, things seem close together, even though we're talking thousands of years. But the reality is that publicly they're willing to say, oh, genetically, Denisovan and Neanderthal and humans all bred at least 50, 60,000 years ago. Well, aren't we getting really close to the Younger Dryas? Aren't we really saying, and again, we don't have a complete paleoanthropological record, but aren't we really saying that a bunch of people got into these very advanced rock cut underground centers, underground living quarters, underground technological, havens, and did some of them not? And everyone who was left surviving, don't we want to revisit the, based on the anatomy and the evidences of what Neanderthals, I mean, we always make them look like they're apes that are really big, yet they had bigger brain capacity, denser bones, stronger muscles, yet we always describe them as looking as, like that they're subhuman. And Denisovan, the jury's out, but either way, they're breeding directly with humans, and we can imagine all the horrors or chaos of whatever all of it looks like on the surface. But you clearly have maybe a smaller group of people that were not cohesive to explain the various times throughout history that there seems to be a conflict amongst these more advanced humans. And again, they were advanced. Just because you were an accountant or could use a computer technology, if you're part of that, crashed cruise ship, it doesn't mean that you are going to be able to come out of the bunker and recreate or rejuvenate your society as it once was. Even if you're aware of the technologies, it may take you many generations and a lot of time to collect any remaining technology. And we have an example of that in the Ural Mountains in Siberia. There was, and the last professor to work on this was Russian, but they were looking for gold reserves. They were looking to go mining. Well, they found gold nanoparts. Anyone can look this up. It was in my book. We've talked about it before, but we're talking gold nano, little tight screws and parts to clearly something that was a machine, some sort of a device of something. They found these parts, and they are at a minimum of 22,000 to 220. And this is based on the geology of the layers that they found them. So the minimum is 22,000 years, well before the Younger Dryas. And they had good geological evidence to say over 220,000 years. And there are some out of place, out of time artifacts like these gold nanoparts that are not explainable, and it's not an intrusive burial. It wasn't, somebody shoveled in and buried them there or something, and they're not really that old. No, they confirmed what they were, how old they are, and it clearly indicates that pre-Younger Dryas, and again, it doesn't explain all the out of place, out of time artifacts, but this is just an example for us to stay within this framework of what are these people doing underground. And I think it's a hodgepodge of survivors from something that was either unexpected or was a conflict, which I think we have other pointers in history to start, working out the psychology of these people. And they have no need to disclose to us that the technology is human, that the technology is local, that they are not from some interdimensional. It's always like, well, maybe they're from another time. And it's like, so you can time travel and you don't go to the beginning of the disaster. You go to humanity here at this point. Well, that's because this is the most current. Well, not if you're time traveling. You can go back anytime you want. I mean, there's like I want to bang my head on a brick wall when we start going, well, there's clearly interdimensional space traveling aliens that want to come to this time period right now, right here.
Talk to me about the Paracas, Jared, the elongated skulls that some television programs insist are evidence of alien hybrids.
No, you're totally dead on. And for everyone out there listening, there's these elongated skulled people. They're found all over the earth. They're found in Egypt. And they're, some of it's known finds. Some of them are finds that are, hidden away. And right now, the Paracas, as we know them, they're found in Peru. They are known to be really good at textiles, but these are elongated skulls that were not pressed by a board, were not wrapped with cloth, and the babies' heads were shaped. These are people that are born naturally with a skull that has a much larger brain capacity. And they're found in Europe. They're found in Asia. They're found in Russia. They're found in the Crimea. And they are a group of people that appear to have lived on the coast of Peru, near the Nazca lines. And again, you have multiple collegiate institutions that are worth billions and billions of dollars. And we have no genetic testing officially. Brian Forrester has done some work of, hidden Inca tours, but lots of raw footage, lots of great stuff. If you haven't seen any of Brian's work, I think he's a great researcher. I mean, just worth checking out. But the reality is that the Paracas, you have redheaded. They're not supposed to be redheads in South America at the time of the Paracas. And the reason they're interesting also is because we do know that they are the oldest mummies found. They're generally naturally preserved, but they're over 9,000 years old. Now, this is known, yet not a single collegiate institution has genetically tested them, because it completely destroys the narrative of, it's such a joke at this point. And we are not going to spend, I am not going to spend hours trying to change this archaic Victorian turn of the century, this ridiculous notion that the only populations in South America and Central and North America came from a land bridge during the Younger Dryas, or that there were nothing but cavemen here. It's such a joke. It's not worth the time. But the reality is that if you test the DNA, I want to answer two points, which is it would completely change. There's no Clovis first. It's, the Clovis is a random name, whatever. There's a history to it, but the name given to the pre-American, Native American, and South American cultures, that the people who are in North America first were the Clovis, and that they kind of spread their way around. And then a lot of busy beavers made a lot of pyramids down in South America and Central America, and everything happened in the last 12 or 13,000 years. And that is a joke. That is just not true. It's not what the archaeological evidence says. It's not even what National Geographic thought. But the Paracas are beyond an elephant in the room. They need to be addressed. And shame on every multi-billion-dollar alleged academic higher, society of learning for not having extensive, like, you want to have a daily cover of an archaeological magazine. You could make archaeological news more interesting than the daily news. And it would be to really follow the genetic testing that has never been done on the Paracas or any elongated skull that appears to have the natural cranium indicators and the arterial dissections, everything about these skulls that show that humanity had a more diverse spectrum of existence. And I mean, we are just, it's just bizarre. I point it out this way because it's just bizarre that they're just not called out on it. I mean, it leaves me half speechless, which is why I'm saying this, is that, look, they're right there. There's tissue samples. I've been able to talk to Nassim Harriman. He did some of the sampling and testing, and there was actual soft tissue. I mean, I talked to Nassim when they were looking at these, and he's like, Jared, there was actual ocular nerve and brain tissue still soft. And he goes, there's not supposed to be soft tissue in 3,000, 4,000 years. And the reality is that the very mechanics of our genetics and the safe mode we seem to be in now indicates that we were much more conscious, like not 10 to 14%, maybe 100% or 90% or 80% conscious. And our bodies had a different wherewithal. I mean, I don't think the soft tissue is just a matter of the right conditions in, weather, but also I think there are indications and there's an endless amount of information that we're going to get, whether it's from stone structures to genetics from the Paracas and other elongated skulled and ancient humans, that are going to show that we were once much more sturdy and maybe lived in longer or indefinitely. I mean, those are all possibilities of a society that seemed to be a lot more terraformed and programmed into what we're calling the natural world, and the physical technologies left in just the stone. I think there was a lot more living technologies that we would think of as more either natural or biotechnical. But now we have a whole nother podcast again.
I've been lucky enough to have interviewed Michael Cremo on this show and put the suggestion forward that maybe all human species were around at the same time on this planet of ours. He concurred that it was certainly very possible or even likely. What, in a nutshell, are your conclusions as to the rise of us and demise of the other human races on this planet? Why did we exclusively survive and our cousins didn't?
I love Michael. I'm assuming that went really well. I've gotten to interview him a few times now, and I think his work is very relatable to this entire suite of questions, because I know you just asked me that question, but I want to know what you think overall between having talked to me and talking to Michael. What's your conclusions on it?
I think it boils down to the haves and have-nots. Sounds familiar, I know, but I think it's been a constant throughout history. One of the species of human, for some reason, fared better than others. That we definitely know, because of maybe having the technology to enable foresight, aka astronomy and the like. I'm guessing this group also built the world network of shelters and tunnels, or at least designed and oversaw the work. Maybe along with other factors, also the climate change that ensued because of the many cataclysms could not be endured by the Paracas and Denisovans. Or maybe these two, along with the Neanderthals and other species, decided to simply face their demise because of their beliefs, or were simply, more likely, denied access to the shelters. The modern humans, as we define ourselves today, or possibly the ruling class back then, maybe saw themselves better than their cousins. This possibly also occurs to me. A bit far out. Why would one species have a superior technology? Could it be that millions of years ago, the human race was the invasive species, that came to this planet, a colony that did what we have always done to Aboriginal peoples. The story, that journey, and our origins lost to time and withheld by the few deliberately. I must admit, when thinking about this possibility, it would explain a few things more logically. Or maybe the Paracas and other races went aground and are still there to this day, active as our UFO phenomena, which you yourself suggest. Take into account the Hindu Vedas, the ancient stories of India, maybe those that were able left the earth. Who knows? If there was technology to soften and shape stone, build it to impossible standards that has not and cannot be reproduced today, and not forgetting the production of an artificial smart soil found all around the planet, terra preta, then it's not that much of a stretch that some could have left the planet before the big one hit. More likely, though, they were left to die through lack of means. Maybe the vital information about the inevitable natural or weaponized cataclysm was deliberately withheld and turned into an opportunity for ethnic cleansing or to strike a final blow in an ancient war. But you asked, and there you have it.
Yeah, this is the issue, is that depending on where you are in your personal, not you, Simon, but like for everyone listening, depending on where you're at with being fascinated or interested in this subject or the general subjects, what happens is right away you start looking for, well, what do we know? And we have a lot of books and information and data out there about recent things. So a lot of people relate the lens and prism that they look at our history with is, well, they jump right to the Anunnaki and they jump right to, so Sumerian culture, but that's in the West. They rarely, we're in the West, so we don't reference Asiatic myths, stories, histories. We always constantly look, we don't look to the hairpin and look back to maybe even, we don't have any writings. So we go with the writings we got. So then everything's about the Anunnaki and Enlil and Enki and then you have, unfortunately, some early confusers. You got Zechariah Sitchin, and then you have what happens is people say, well, there's this, they go into the Bible, they go into scripts that are writings from the last 5,000 or 6,000 years, and they can't help. And then you have eyewitness accounts of, in quotes, aliens, and no one. We have home gene CRISPRs. We've covered this. No one with advanced genetic technology has any need to reveal that they're human. Their ability to combine, like Tesla and Elon Musk working with a brain chip, and what you can already do in an F-22 fighter pilot's mind, which is run a weapons system or part of your system from direct mind control. There is no one with advanced ancient technologies there's no obligation for them to explain, we're human. We're not alien. In fact, it's better that you think we're from somewhere else, because God forbid we'd want to let you know that we could have cured cancer for you, like, 1,000 years ago or 5,000 years ago. But that's where everyone starts. They hear these stories of gods and myths and all this stuff that really is this last 5 or 6. It's the history we know. And we relate to it. We get into the details of these myths and these lores. Well, you have to table all of it and not reference that there are hints of truths and echoes of slivers of truths. But then you have to take someone like Michael Cremo, and it's not Michael Cremo. It's Michael Cremo taking 10 years to compile actual paleoanthropological finds and referencing all 770. And by the way, it's not a complete list. It's just that there is a group of Victorian, 1800s and early 1900s men and women that go out and they truly believe that we were all rock banging Neanderthals, and then we progressively turned into where we are. So they're looking at evidences and they're either skipping it, ignoring it, or just not comprehending some of the advanced technologies they're finding. And they build a narrative about the history of humanity. And we are still stuck. It's like growing up in a particular religion because you don't have a choice. And it's really hard not to relate to the world from the religion you grow up with. It has a lot of, depending on if and there are people who grew up with no religion, so they have a completely different perspective. It's hard not to either relate to something because of your indoctrination and because of the way you just have lenses for it. So Michael's work is important because it points out, hey, we found this is where everyone has to start. This is super important. So here it is. There is actual evidence that paleoanthropologists would find a anatomically correct, a human bone in it. They found it in the red crag. So in the 2, 5, 7 million year old layers of earth, they find human bones, and they don't just find it in one place or another. And they find, so here's the other thing. There's always primitive humans. There's always people who choose to live off the grid, Simon. And there are, it's kind of funny.
I got that. No, I got that. I was chuckling to myself. I had the mic off.
See, I think, you got to keep it on. We're not going to get the chuckling. And the problem then is that all along, you're always going to find a campfire and a couple rocks that people bang together. And you're always going to say, well, see, here's an indicator. We all used to be Neanderthal. Well, no, there are tribes right now all over the earth leaving evidences of being primitive. Meanwhile, we have advanced phones and the technology that everyone's listening to this show on. And when all of that's gone, we're only going to have those fire pits, and we're going to say, well, see, we were just very primitive then. We didn't. There are stories of glass that had moving pictures on it, and it's like, no. We found this campfire. That must have been just a story and an allegory. No, that's the problem. Is that in the paleoanthropological record. And that's why Michael Cremo's book, and by the way, he's very subtly funny. It is very technical. There's a reason he's become involved in archaeological congresses and has been, if they can't beat him, they made him join. The reality is that he's invited to a lot of archaeological things because of the deep understanding and complex collection and collections that are within forbidden archaeology. These are solid, not maybes, 100%. This is a long, follow me along. I know this is a long stream of consciousness here, but for everyone listening, I cannot shout this enough. Take every story you've heard about Anunnaki and aliens and whatever the hell you want to think of every story you're unpacking over the last 6,000 years, and understand that anatomically, in quotes, modern human bones have been found in layers of the earth back, including a boot print with stitching in it that's over 120 million years old. And there have been skulls and human parts found in 60 million, 80 million. I was just saying 3, 4, 5, 7 million. And I'm going back in order because the paleoanthropological record shows eoliths and neoliths, which are rock-shaped tools for humans, going back hundreds of thousands of years beyond the alleged simpleton human record. And also you have Hueyatlaco, Mexico. You have there are finds all over the earth that show a history of humanity of anatomically correct humans going back millions of years. Now, the only biblical reference we have for that, and I say that because it catches everyone's Western ear, biblical reference. If I say that, it has a weight to it. It has a sound to it. But then if I say Hindu Vedas, if I say Hinduism, if I say Krishna, if I say anything like that, it has this exotic, I'm going to grab a coffee at your local espresso shop before I hit my yoga class. And so we have this different vertical, this different dimension that we put that. So, but if I say biblical reference, it has a certain weight. And I guess I'm just fine tuning it. But the reality is that we have Hindu Veda references, biblical references that show that humanity is millions of years old and has been here. And we don't treat the Eastern Hindu Vedas, the way we treat a biblical reference, we immediately can see that it overlaps with Anunnaki and Sumerian culture, and it must be aliens. And I back to banging my head on a wall. The reality is, everyone, there are human bones that show we've been here for at least uncomfortably millions of years, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 20, 60 million, 120 million year old boot print. And that throws everyone off. Because what can we say about the story of humanity a million years ago? It's just untangible. But you have to cut the umbilical cord to telling the story that, well, we know about the Anunnaki and Planet 9 and Nibiru, and clearly we're from another planet. And it's like, there is no obligation of an advanced human to explain to you that they are human and that we have been here for millions of years and that we have risen and fallen. But it's only because we got to a very advanced point. And at some point from all that, and I know we haven't talked about terra preta, but there is engineered soil. We're talking about carbon problems, yet we have engineered soil all over the earth that filters heavy metals, filters carbon dioxide, and clearly a society that terraformed and managed the planet to the point that they thought of carbon management thousands of years before us, and they were doing it on a worldwide scale. And the reality is that we're still debating, well, we know there's aliens and we know they're interdimensional and they're time traveling, but we're not remotely touching the fact that humanity in its current form is well over 2, 3, 4, 20, 60, 120 million years. And that is uncomfortable. That's frustrating. It's like when you say you want a diet or you want to become physically, you want to change your physical form, you want to get fit, you want to change what you do for work. And then you get down to the nit and gritty, and a lot of the tasks seem overwhelming and just monumental. Then this is that. It's like, I'm sorry, folks, we have 100 million years of human history that we don't know anything about. And the very basic institutions won't genetically test the very materials we have to get us to table and just articulate the actual questions to explain why we have very advanced craft that still seem echoes or technical indicators of human touch. No, we're just going to talk about interdimensional space traveling aliens, because that's where we're going to go.
I think it's safe to say that folklore, religious text, and fable is certainly valuable in giving us clues when recounting our past, but we must look at those logically and dispassionately. According to mainstream academics in the field of archaeology, and remember, this has been taught as absolute fact, we have, as modern humans, only hundreds of thousands of years in historical existence and achievement to claim, and only as fur-clad simpletons crawling up the discovery ladder of trial and error. Now, that certainly could have happened at some point, but I'm becoming more convinced that the relatively recent ladder climbing, aka those hundreds of thousands of years, was a rediscovery or restart after the many great falls that have happened in our past. Mainstream academia does not entertain the possibility that we as humans may have existed on this planet for millions of years, regardless of the increasing amount of evidence put forward by many researchers like Michael Cremo, Graham Hancock, and yourself, and the list goes on. The questions attached to this evidence are mind-boggling. For example, a stone tool you mentioned earlier, does this mean all of society was at that level of basic technology, or only the hunter-gatherers of that far-off distant world that we ourselves also have today? This dated stone tool, is that the point in time of the great clawback of survival post the super civilization collapse? Or was it the great ready, steady, go moment for all bipeds on this planet? So reference to the old text and accounts of sky gods can therefore possibly be taken as the writings of the many generations of survivors from a lost era of excellence and unfortunate cataclysm. The parlor game Chinese Whispers comes to mind. I'm convinced that through the ages, many documents of true accounts as to our origins that were written by and for us have been destroyed or withheld deliberately. That could have saved us all this conjecture. Jared, how important is it that we look back and try to learn not just our true story, or as you would state, a rescue and recovery? How important is it that we learn lessons from that past as we strive forward in this continuing journey of being ourselves on this particular page in this, our continuing story?
I think very much so. And I think one of the, so there's all the subject matter of, do we want to know everything about our past? Yes. Now here's the other thing. And I think this has been what's the most frustrating for people like us, who we want to know all of it, but there are people that if we were to sit here and have a very uncomfortable conversation of, are there people that should not know about all this? Which is, I think, the very reason that there is clandestine works. It's not just so that militaries can compete with each other. It's not just because a shadow government wants control of the planet or other sordid conspiracies and a conspiracy doesn't mean not reality. I just mean that there's a lot of different rabbit holes where we could say, why isn't the truth out there? And the elementary and unfortunate truth is that I think for a number of people, this would cause a collapse in current society, because there are, I think, many people who are not only not ready, but they live in a system that is orderly, including their day-to-day construct, where they need the matrix, they need the system, and it is too conflicting with current. And by the way, it doesn't matter what part of the hemisphere of the planet you're on. It is too conflicting with your spiritual and I say it this way on purpose, your religious or spiritual beliefs, and to reveal, I think, the realities that are already common sense in front of us about our ancient past, our ancient advanced past, and the remnants of that technology. People are relating to it through these different modalities. And I say it that way because that in itself is a certain group of people where, crystals do this, or the equinox does that, or they understand the idea of sound and frequency in it. And I mean, I sound like a hippie, and I'm a sandal wearing hippie. And yet I make my own essential oils. I mean, I'll out myself.
Jared, I thought I knew you. I never knew that about you. Obviously, I didn't know you wore sandals or make your own essential oils. Carry on. I just wanted to put that.
Yeah. So I do. Well, when I at first I met a buddy who was barefoot, and I'm like, you're nuts. And then I read Born to Run by Christopher McDougall, and I'm like, whoa. The reality is the human foot should be in minimalist wear. You should develop that. And I usually wear zero tread shoes. I use zero. It's a brand. I have nothing to do with the company, but I wanted to find the most minimalistic shoe. And when I heard about the Tarahumara of northern Mexico that run 90, 80, 120 miles a day, and they're doing it in basically rope strapped rubber that they cut out of tires to make just a platform to run on. I eventually, I'll wear boots and I wear climbing shoes. I mean, it's not like I won't wear a dress shoe. I happen to like suits, but the reality is that the majority of the time, the human foot should be put in a position of using its natural muscles and bone to, strengthen itself and not be constrained by a shoe. I did, by the way, most of my South African research. When I was there for a month, I was in sandals. I was in flat sandals in the bush.
But you're opening there, and I kind of, that was like, I totally missed the point until I thought, hang on a minute, Jared's being serious here. That's a really good thing. But basically, the other thing I do, see, when I get stressed and surprise, hello, it's been really stressful this last couple of years, whatever the weather. And I say this to a few of my friends as well, but you've got to be sincere about it. You being the collective they, not you, Jared, because you just basically outed yourself, and that's awesome. I stand on the ground, the dirt, regardless of the weather, in bare feet, and I just breathe slowly, and just be quiet. No earbuds, no drums or anything like that. I just be still. And I just like to say to you that gave me the confidence to say that, because I thought, you're joking, because I know, like, you and me talk off air quite a lot and we laugh and joke, and I thought it was another, but it wasn't. And that is really amazing. It's one of those, bloody hell, yeah. Anyway,
well, and I do it 20 below zero and snow. I'm still wearing those zero sandals. I've had to replace the loops because I put them through weather that most people don't. When I was at the Grand Canyon, that we started with the GE Kincaid Cave, when I hiked out to the rim of the canyon, when I was there, it was in sandals. The whole thing was in sandals. And the point isn't, I don't think about it anymore. When I did the research was about how you walk, how you move, how your body functions. And the reality is that doing it connected to the earth or close to barefoot is a really good way to operate for the mechanics of your feet. There's a lot of stuff we could geek out about it, but I don't think about it. I don't do it like you said. It's where you do your Tai Chi, and it's important to be able to do it somewhere where you can be at peace, feet in the dirt, and smoke while you do the Tai Chi too. That'd be a good look. The sandal wearing is not for anyone else to look at, but I forget that it's 0 degrees, it's freezing, and I'm wearing sandals. And
about the Terra Preta, you might not be doing it on Terra Preta, but let's say our environment was a lot warmer back in the day, so our feet, when we weren't born with shoes, so we're not as naturally obliged to wear shoes or any feet coverings. I would say it's like any creature that walks on this earth of ours. Your feet adapt. But I just think on Terra Preta being manufactured, I wonder what effects that would have on your biorhythm. Thoughts on that one, Jared?
I wonder that also. There's a number of areas where I live and in the surrounding states that are unglaciated, and there is soil that is pre-Younger Dryas. And the questions are always, well, how much of this soil is engineered or some sort of an ancient biochar? And how much, in reference to its electromagnetic properties, does that have to do with connecting to the human body along with the other, what we think is, in quotes, natural random plants or unengineered, terraformed biotechnology that we, again, we're calling it natural. The reality is how much of that all connected together. And instead of like crushing up 1,000 plants to make an essential oil, so I make my own lotions and things that are healthier for the body, using essential oils. But the reality is, what if, again, the vibrations and frequencies and vibrational medicine, what if it wasn't a requirement to destroy a plant in order to receive those vibrational benefits of, or the frequency of, what each plant or walking amongst the soil that's all connected together, how much contact, how much of it in smell or sense or energy was related to just being near it or being able to up or download it through just connecting to the soil. Those are one of the many complex questions we have to answer, and we have to keep being aware of to answer.
So it's almost like the kind of stand amongst the lotus blossom is to become the lotus blossom, that sort of thing.
Yep. There is.
That was a bit geeky. Oh, maybe I'll scrub that one.
No, actually, I was hesitating to reference The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise, and I'm picturing his Shogun laying there, dying and looking at the lotus, looking at the cherry blossom, going, so beautiful, and as he's passing away. So, Jared, before we wrap up, because that's at the top of the hour, I'd just like to say thank you so much for coming onto the show, because I didn't actually say, Jared Murphy, welcome to the show. And I really apologize for that. So before we wrap up, I'd like you to consider coming back onto the show sometime. You and I know we've got some projects that we're going to be doing together, which would be great. Maybe you could touch on that. But also, tell us when we can expect your book, and also how we can get in touch with you and where we can find videos, blogs, podcasts, and all the things relating to Not Aliens. It's not aliens. Yeah, right. Well, and I'm not saying there aren't aliens, but the books, the new release in color will be available in an ebook, will be available in an actual tangible copy, and will be available in an audio book. Looks like our release date, we were looking for the next couple of weeks, but it looks like it'll be May, end of May. And that'll be available on notaliens.com. Notaliens.com does have shows linked to it that I am on, including yours and others. And of course, Not Aliens has a member area, which you can always sign up for exclusive content. Also helps for expeditions and other work. I always appreciate that. A lot of different options. Some are just a couple bucks a month. And then, of course, Not Aliens on YouTube. Feel free to subscribe. That's where my latest documentary is, TerraCore. And you are, of course, one of those wonderful voices on that. So for anyone who hasn't seen it, go check out TerraCore on my YouTube channel, Not Aliens. And then, of course, here, we definitely have both been busy, but I always enjoy coming on. I always appreciate being here, and it's always a great time, but we will have to schedule something offline.
Absolutely. Jared Murphy, thank you.
You're welcome.
And that was the Jared Murphy catch-up interview. As always, I really appreciated talking to Jared today, as I never know where he's going next, and I just love hearing his take on our ancient past. This is a subject that fascinates me, and personally I have a strange, almost homesick feeling when speculating upon this topic. Knowing who we were and where we came from is one of the top questions I have, but alas, these answers are time-locked by an impossible distance and deliberate withholding of evidences, in my opinion, that is. Will history repeat itself, aka the vast network of deep underground military bases that have been built, or DUMBs as they are known? Who knows? But my thanks to Jared for his time today. Check out his YouTube channel and his website, www.notaliens.com. And my thanks to you, my dear listeners, for attending this cast. You can find the Slick Podcast at our new Virgin website, theslkpodcast.com. There you can catch up all the latest episodes and our past also. Our site is very much a work in progress, so please keep checking in. If you enjoyed the show, give it a like and consider subscribing also, if you'd be so kind. Leave a comment below or send the show an email, theslkpodcast@gmail.com. But either way, please, keep them kind. You can find the show on all the usual podcast platforms, including Twitter, Facebook and YouTube. And so, my friends, it's time for me to go. Until next time, stay safe, be happy, and certainly not afraid. Bye.
Slick Podcast. Keeping it real. And always keeping it groovy.